Mr. Polumbo, thank you for reminding us, of the children who have suffered from these lockdowns. I agree with you. I don't think anybody intentionally wanted more children to kill themselves, to have more teenage suicide, but it is an unintended consequence, and I think no one's really pushing back and saying it doesn't have something to do with the isolation kids are feeling from being at home and cooped up and not able to go to school. It would be one thing if people could say, well, the lockdown saved 1 million lives. Instead, I think it's very hard to look at objective evidence that says the lockdowns have saved any lives. And this will be debated for some time to come, hopefully with less emotion and with more objectivity. You mentioned Henry Hazlitt and the idea that responsible policymaking looks at immediate intentions, but also at ultimate consequences, unintended consequences. Bastiat referred to this as sort of the seen and the unseen. It's very easy to see the PPP program. Someone gives you a whole bunch of money and you buy something, or you keep your employees employed for 3 months and you see the seen. The unseen is what happens to so much debt and so much borrowing over time. Can you describe your opinion as to what will happen, or what are the risks of borrowing $6 trillion over a 2-year period?
Yes, Senator Paul, and thank you for the question. I can speak to this as somebody who will be paying off this debt the rest of my life in my 20s. We just have spent a total of $6 trillion on COVID relief, though according to PolitiFact, 90% of the last bill was not directly related to COVID-19. Now that money will hang over my generation the rest of our lives and future generations in the form of decreased economic growth and opportunity, higher taxes every year to meet the interest payments, and if interest rates go up to anywhere close to historical norms, that will become an enormous expense on us. So when we're talking about expensive programs, expensive government programs, we have to see clear proof that they've worked if we're going to argue that they should be reiterated in future iterations. And when it comes to the Paycheck Protection Program and many of these other stimulus efforts, that evidence just simply isn't there. An MIT economist found that the Paycheck Protection Program only preserved roughly 2.3 million jobs in its first iteration. That came out to $224,000 in taxpayer expenditure per job preserved. That, for members of my generation who will be paying the consequences the rest of our lifetimes, is not a fair trade-off. And Thomas Sowell said this, the famed economist, there's only trade-offs in policy.
Of the $1 trillion that's still left in the pipeline, do you think we'd be wiser to be looking at how that money can be spent and will be spent rather than adding another $2 trillion?
Yeah, it is disturbing to me that we're pouring more federal money out the door like candy on Halloween before even eating what we've already doled out. I just find the way that this was done in terms of sending money out in response to an emergency, it's understandable, but it was done with very minimal verification requirements, leading to enormous fraud problems. Here's what the Wall Street Journal reported. The federal government is swamped with reports of potential fraud in the Paycheck Protection Program. Evidence is growing that many took advantage of the program's open-door design. Banks and the government allowed companies to self-certify that they needed the funds with little vetting. A federal watchdog within the Small Business Administration said there were strong indicators of widespread potential abuse and fraud. They've counted tens of thousands of companies that received PPP loans for which they appear to have been ineligible, the journal reports. And tens of thousands of organizations also appear to have received more money than they should have based on their head counts. And this is just one of the many COVID programs. So we've already allocated so much money, but we haven't fixed the glaring problems with how it's being spent. So to me, it is irresponsible with taxpayer resources to go and send much more out the door.
Thank you.